for me personally, like, the two things that I found effective is making an ethnicity-specific show. Because if people see, oh, this is a show for me, then they'll come, and because if the show is about something having to do with me, then I will, I'll come to that, or, there's the free ticket thing.
But any show is incidentally going to have its intentional or unintentional target audience. Smart people, cynical people, people who like Schadenfreude, like assholes, like, they're, past race, or creed, or religion, or, sexuality, like, not every show is going to be for everybody. Like, we just did Crumble, Play Me Down, Justin Timberlake by Sheila Callahan, and like, that is not for people who like Neil Simon. Like, it is a weird, a very accessible, like, curiously accessible play that we had like a wide berth of people that really came and enjoyed it. But we just targeted it as something odd and unconventional, and because that's what works in our particular milieu. I use but like in Austin, if you say like there's a murderous apartment, people are like, that is not my alley. But it is hard. There's always going to be that kind of stuff they think.
Right, but it does tend to divide up around class lines in some ways, and so that affects racial things as well, and so that's kind of, that's where things get a little bit tricky, I think, because it's like, I think, the reason why, most of my audience members like went to college is that, like weird and unconventional work is, in theater, like experimental theater is something, it's such a like a boutique kind of art form,
We have a question here from Twitter, actually. It says, would love to hear her talk about the theatricality of We're Gonna Die. Is it a play, confessional, rock gig, all?
So what We're Gonna Die ended up being was, because I'm not a performer and I can't act at all, I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And so I basically ended up building a play for that a non-performer can do, and that will only work if a non-performer does it. So if somebody gets on stage and they're like fabulous, like the show won't work. Like it has to be somebody who's just standing up there and who's talking pretty much exactly the way that I'm talking now, and the person sings song, and it's almost like, it's definitely a play, like all the stories are true, but they're mostly not my stories, and it's like an autobiographical monologue, where all of the stories are things that could have happened to anybody in the audience, and so, and all of the songs are sort of like a continuation of the monologue, so it's almost like one long monologue, and then the songs are, they could just as easily be spoken, and it's all things that, it was like the most universal thing I could, just everything is like really pretty universal human experiences, everyone goes through. And by the end, like the whole audience is singing, we're gonna die, like we are going to die, over and over again. And that was always like the culminating, because that was like what's the one universal thing? It's the fact that all of us are going to die. And the show is sort of about, and the reason why it has to be done by a non-performer is the show is sort of about how like the human desire to be special and different from other people can actually end up hurting us, because there are certain things, there are certain areas in which we're not special. For example, in sickness, aging, and death, like there are certain things in tragedy, and there are certain things you just can't avoid no matter how amazing you are, and so the show is really like it's a play about being an ordinary person.
Question about funding. You kind of brought it up a minute ago, and it seems like particularly in relation to the show you were saying that it had to be a people pleaser. How much does the money-making ability of a performance affect your creative process? Do you just not think about it at all?
Well, I'm really lucky. I've been really, really lucky in that, one of the amazing things about this experimental theater world that I work in is that there's so little money that everybody who's working in it is not doing it for the money. Right. Like, it's not even like really a concern, like it's, it's like everybody, there's just nothing. I've never worked worked for a theater where anybody is making any money. So the priority really is just always on the work, you know. And I do worry about audiences, but it's never. I mean, nobody's gonna make money anyway, you know. So it's like, you know, I've done shows where when I was starting out, where there would be like, you know, 5 people in the audience, and the venue thought that the show was like a huge success, you know, because and you know, not because that was a huge number for them, but just because like the piece, you know, the piece was like it was out there, people saw it, they liked it, they thought it was good, it got good press, you know, stuff like that. So I've been really lucky that way so far. But I've just started, you know, my first movie project. I'm writing a movie for Paramount, and so I've gone from one extreme to the other, and it's really been a kind of a shock.
And I was wondering, could you tell us what's the movie about?
Oh, it's.
Because I think I know what it is.
No. It's been about 10 to 15 different things. Like I'm just nervous about saying it on camera because like they're gonna kill me because I've changed my mind about 15 times about like what I want to do. So I'm like, I want to do this, and they're like, okay, sounds good, and then I lose interest in it, and then and this is how I work in theater as well. But in theater, there's not like this much money riding on it, you know, and like this. So it's like I've been kind of driving me crazy. So I keep changing my idea. So I don't actually want it I don't want it on record what it's about.
Gotcha.
Because, you know.
I did come armed to the last time we talked in the discussion like this, it was about 6 years ago. And I made a comment that I love to write plays, but I hate rehearsals. And you said the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And how is it with, I knew that you were working on a movie, so I was wondering, how is that? I mean, you don't really have, are you sitting down with actors and working with?
No. It's my
trying
first
scenes
time.
to see if they work?
It's my first time just writing. And you know, the thing that helps is I think if you're doing linear storytelling, then the writing part's better. The writing part is horrible when you're doing experimental work that's non-linear, because like the organizing principle becomes much more obscure, and then it's much harder, and you kind of have to be. For me, I kind of have to be in the room, you know. But if you're writing a story, I think it's a little bit better in terms of writing.
Can you throw out any of these rejected themes?
I wrote a horror movie that was set in an artist colony. It was like, and all of the different sort of like at the artist colonies, they do all these things, like they play croquet and badminton, so those became like weapons of destruction.
I remember when you put on Facebook about that. I said, I just happened to be at one right now.
Yeah, and it was just like, it ended up in this like, you know, mass sort of butchery of artists in different ways, and the studio was like, you know, they were like, first of all, like, you know, America is not interested in artists. You know? And well, they said they can't relate to artists, you know, and then second of all, like the, you know, mass, and I was like, but they're all being slaughtered, so maybe America will like that. And they were like, they didn't go for it. And then the other idea that is sort of currently in the works is 2 people who are social outcasts with extreme social anxiety disorder join a self-help clinic where they are made to put on a production of Oklahoma. So it's like a bunch of like people with extreme social anxiety who are performing Oklahoma. So that's the other idea.
What are some shows or some artists that you've encountered recently that are especially of interest or exciting to you?
There's a company from Holland called Cassis, like Kassys, and I really like their work a lot. My good friend Tom Bradshaw, who's a really interesting playwright, and Nature Theater of Oklahoma, some of my friends. Yeah.
Wonderful. Any other questions before we wrap up?